Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar for specialty pharmacy. Q Consulting has been helping and providing consulting services across a wide range of consumer and pharmacy initiatives. I would say that one of the areas we have seen the strongest interest, particularly in the last 3 to 5 years, is specialty pharmacy. So I hope you all enjoy today's webinar. Let's get started. I do have a fairly broad range of backgrounds in our audience today, some hospital CEOs, those of you who are running a hospital specialty pharmacy and probably have, quite a lot of insight. So I'll quickly define what specialty medications mean so that I cover all audiences. Historically, specialty medications were mostly injectable products, things that you're probably familiar with through your oncology infusion centers. However, a significant number of medications have now come to market that are considered specialty oral medications, particularly in oncology and inflammatory conditions. I think the most confusing part of specialty pharmacy is that the market thinks it's something very different to regular retail pharmacy. In some ways it is, but really in most cases it isn't. And really, the only people that define the category of specialty drugs are usually the payers, PBMs, and the drug manufacturers. So typically it comes to one of those to decide who is or what is considered specialty. So with regards to payers, each health plan or PBM might have a different criteria for defining a specialty drug. I would say that if you look at the right-hand side here, in most cases, they are all quite expensive. In some cases, they might treat a complex disease like cystic fibrosis. Some of them are orphan drugs, and that's how they're defined as specialty. Some of them might require special handling, like cold chain processes. A few of them, especially in the oncology world, might be limited distribution. Two areas we see this the most is oncology and MS, or, in the case of a few of them, many of them, a patient might need to be trained to administer them. So in the case of things like Humira, Enbrel, which is self-injectables, the new medications for migraines, Aimovig, or some of the MS drugs, the patient self-administers, and that is what defines them as specialty. So again, things that defined as specialty may or may not be that much more difficult than what you're currently dispensing in the pharmacy, but may have one of these conditions that a PBM or manufacturer has decided makes it a specialty drug. To give you some background, these are the areas where specialty drug spend is mostly focused. You have oncology and anti-inflammatories. Now, anti-inflammatories mostly cover things like rheumatology, gastroenterology, Crohn's disease is a big one there, dermatology with psoriatic arthritis. They all lead the list on the inflammatory condition side. Then you have infectious diseases, HIV and Hep C, and neurology. MS is the big one there. However, with some of the new migraine drugs, we've seen that enter the market as well. Another thing to note here is the last bullet on cardiology. So for those of you who are pharmacists, you're probably aware that there were 2 cholesterol medications approved back in 2017. They each carried about a $1,400 price tag. However, the payers were so hesitant to approve them that they weren't really being allowed under the prior authorization process. Recently, the 2 drug companies that make those lowered those prices to $500 a month, still considered specialty medications, they're self-injectables. However, I would expect to start seeing this cardiology specialty market start to ramp up with that approval. With the lower cost. So for those of you that have cardiologists on staff, the idea that many of them might start prescribing and getting approved for these medications really might open that opportunity a lot more. This next slide shows the top selling drugs globally. And as you can see, 15 out of the 20 of them are specialty. Many of them are not take-home medications, but you can see that the top three, Humira, Enbrel, and Revlimid, lead the charge across all specialty drug spend, all drug spend. Things like the Remicades or infusions are usually given in your infusion centers, sometimes given on home infusion. Everything that has a star against it in this slide is a medication that can technically be dispensed to a regular outpatient or retail pharmacy, with some exceptions based upon manufacturers' limited distribution that I described in the last page. The biggest one here that's really hard to get a hold of is probably Revlimid, one of the hardest and most prescribed drugs. Very narrow network of pharmacies that they allow to dispense that medication. You have a bunch on the MS side here. Tecfidera, you can get access to that. You just need to jump some hurdles. And migraine, which I mentioned, is one of the new bigger areas that we're seeing a lot of volume for. Next slide just sort of talks about some of the trends. And although only 2 to 3% of the population actually take a specialty medication, it actually accounts for about 2/3 of overall drug spend. 1/3 of overall drug spend, and is expected to increase to be about 50% of total drug spend this year. For those of you that run a HR department that's on the call today, or are CFOs, you'll probably see this in your own health benefit plans, specialty drugs making up probably close to half of your overall prescription benefit plan spend. So regarding the hospital market, currently about 1 in 5 have specialty pharmacy capabilities. I mentioned early on the amount of interest we've seen in this area. Right now, most large academic medical centers and large health systems have a specialty pharmacy. We're seeing a lot of interest from the mid-sized hospital systems, anybody with an infusion center or oncologist on staff, rheumatologists, gastroenterologists, neurologists, infectious disease specialists, anyone in rural areas probably could benefit from having some form of specialty pharmacy or specialty pharmacy arrangement in place. With few exceptions, hospitals have been quite late to the game for specialty pharmacy. The market is really dominated by the PBMs, Express Scripts, Caremark, Optum. They lead the market. Then you have Walgreens, who has been acquiring and actively growing this side of their business because of the tremendous growth that underlies it. As I mentioned, there's been a lot of interest from more of the mid-sized hospitals and single-site hospitals, and even critical access hospitals that I work with that have infusion centers or certain key specialists that prescribe these medications have been seeing some really tremendous profit, as well as patient care benefits. I was on the phone with one potential client in Texas last week who has an infusion center, and they have found some enormous patient care benefits for some infusion drugs for gout patients that are, unable to leave the home because of the pain after this one specialty medication that's infused, really having enormous benefits for them there. Right now, about 2 in 5 hospitals are considering a specialty pharmacy program. It's probably those of you who are on the phone today. Smaller and mid-sized hospitals looking to expand potentially their existing outpatient pharmacies, while the larger institutions are looking to build or outfit brand new facilities to launch these businesses. I've mentioned this a few times about the infusion center, but a lot of my smaller 340B clients, so those that historically may not be all that profitable because they just don't have enough prescribing volume, but because of their 340B status, are looking to expand into specialty pharmacy. There's some enormous potential for profits out of this. For example, the Humiras of the world, which retail for about $3,500, can generally be bought for under $100. So anyone that has rheumatologists on staff, or even in rural areas where you have primary care physicians prescribing rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis medications, having a specialty outlet can be enormous for profit there. Also, it's just patient convenience. There are a lot of different paths hospitals can choose when looking at specialty pharmacy really depends upon your hospital size, what kind of internal operational capabilities you have. We'll definitely go through these in more depth. They could range from building your own specialty pharmacy, which we're doing with hospitals like CHRIST Regional Hospital in Georgia or GBMC in Maryland and Covenant Healthcare in Michigan right now. And other options might be completely outsourced, complete outsourcing options, which, was better suited for one of our clients, Stanford Health in Connecticut. And then you have hospitals, systems like Baystate and Sentara, Baystate's in Massachusetts and Sentara in Virginia, that have completely outsourced the back office piece of their entire specialty pharmacy business to a partner. Where we come in is we just help you analyze what's the best decision for you, whether it's to build your own, whether it's to partner with some sections, or whether to outsource the entire thing. Really comes down to, again, your own operational capabilities, what the opportunity looks like, and your leadership's intentions and desire to invest in this area. So let's move on to some of the reasons you might want to open a specialty pharmacy, starting with financial. Quite simply, it can be very, very profitable. Some of the quotes here show you the kinds of sizes of investment or sales or revenues and profits that can come out of this business. University of Michigan Hospital was reported to be dispensing close to 8,000 medications each month to about 2,000 patients with revenues in excess of $50 million. You have the Cleveland Clinic saying it would recoup its original investment within its first 16 months of operations. Both of those pharmacies have been up and running for quite a while now. Another example I have personally worked with is one single site 340B hospital. They had an infusion center with oncologists that were doing chemo. They were actually able to achieve over $400,000 in profit in a single month. Now that's profit, not revenue, just from oral oncolytics. That was after only 9 months of operations. One thing more to note on this slide is for those of you that are 340B eligible, the profits can be extraordinary. They can really drive a lot of future investment potential because of their size. If you think about the average oncology medication at over $10,000 with a 40 to 50% gross margin, it sure beats what you can get from selling amlodipine to your patients. Another benefit is actually employees. We talked earlier about how for those of you that have self-funded plans, the cost of specialty medications as a percentage of your overall prescription benefit plan is probably approaching 50%. We've been able to help non-340B hospitals reduce that expense by about 20% just by having a specialty pharmacy in-house that the employees use. The most thorough program that we've seen for the next section, which is 340B hospitals, was implemented by Scripps in California. They have a program called Care Partner, which encourages their employees to become 340B eligible through a range of different steps. And for those of you who are 340B eligible, you probably know the hurdles that they involve. And in order to do so, they waive all copays for these specialty medications. This hospital, Scripps, has taken a series of steps, and they continue to do so each year to ensure that they're compliant under 340B. The program passed a HRSA 340B audit in 2016. The overall program has led to tremendous savings across the Scripps employee benefit plan base. I think that it was published one year, they saved over $400,000 on one employee alone. Now, patient care benefits, it's really why many of us are here. How do we help patients? The one thing I'll say is, finance team, very happy to help patients and love doing it, but it's very hard to justify unless those two prior points can be realized, and it can be done on a positive return on investment. So hospital-owned specialty pharmacy can really provide a major service to its patients. It's a significant step in ensuring that you're providing a full scale of continuum of care. It's also done with a local presence, which most specialty pharmacies aren't. Most of them are mail order pharmacies based out of places like Flint, Michigan, Orlando, Florida, or St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm sure it's obvious to most of you, but hospitals are ideally positioned to coordinate care for patients that require the kind of ongoing high-touch services that usually comes with specialty medication therapy management. An additional benefit that physicians love is that it shifts the burden of the responsibility of managing these patients from the physician, who is typically the first person called when a patient has questions, to the pharmacists. Then you have some additional benefits like being able to bill for MTM services on top of the specialty medications in some cases. All hospitals that we work with will argue that their specialty pharmacies are superior at overseeing the needs of patients using specialty medications because of their access to medical records, lab results, physician notes, which means that the pharmacists, instead of the physicians, can more closely monitor the effectiveness of the drugs on the patient, look at how they're using the medications, and have the ability to act quickly when something isn't working the way it should. Okay, probably the most important step is, the business planning phase when it comes to looking to open one of these businesses. It can be an expensive step if you do get it wrong. How we work with hospitals is we help them develop both business plans and implementation plans that look at what the strategic reasons are for the hospital going into specialty pharmacy, what the economic feasibility looks like, what are the product opportunities, where are your customers, who are your payers, and who are your competitors, and then what's the optimal path to execution. How, going forward, is the pharmacy going to capture, fill, and dispense those prescriptions, and importantly, also stay on top of the refills. What type of infrastructure do you need? What kind of space requirements do you need? And then finally, what kind of organizational structure and staffing needs do you need to put in place to make this successful? Again, it's all part of a business plan that we generally help our clients develop. We'll say that there are different approaches we talked about earlier. There's no one-size-fits-all strategy. Majority of the hospitals we work with generally choose to move down the specialty pharmacy path on a go-it-alone basis. However, the goal of our engagements is to work with our clients and help determine the strategies that is best for you. The different approaches could range from developing a collaborative arrangement with an existing specialty pharmacy to help your patients, to joining specialty pharmacy networks, and as I mentioned, the most common that we see is a hospital establishing their own specialty pharmacy program. So regardless of the approach, it's critical that you develop a strategy that makes sense for your organization. And that's where we like to come in. If you do want to partner, we can typically recommend, or we've worked with many different partners in the past. We know what their weaknesses and strengths are and what comes with that arrangement from a cost basis and a profit basis and a patient care basis. So looking at how, if you're going to do this yourself, how you might want to build out a economic feasibility path. To determine the ROI, you really need to understand the products that you'll be offering. So when we do this, we work with our clients and we look at the data that they have available. We try to mine any e-prescribing records from your outpatient clinics and your specialists and narrow those down by medication categories. Sometimes that data isn't available. States like New York, for example, have mandatory e-prescribing, so it's typically pretty easily done there. Other states, other hospital systems, you don't have a lot of physicians e-prescribing, and therefore the data isn't available. And in that case, we work with the clinical staff to look at prescribing trends. So another way to approach it is, if you do not have a neurologist at your hospital, then MS probably isn't going to be a very big category for you. It might not be an area worth focusing on in your efforts when you get this pharmacy started. Next, you have customers. So when you think of pharmacy, typically potential customers are identified as patients, people who come to pick up their medications. Specialty pharmacy is a little bit different here because a lot of your customers will actually be your physicians. They are the people that will be recommending your specialty pharmacy to the patients. And marketing yourself to them is really about showing them how you can help relieve their staff's burden of things like prior authorizations, which is probably the biggest one, how affordability needs of the patient can be met, making sure that they get their medication. It's also really important when it comes to ACOs and patients that are on risk-based contracts. Regarding payers, Medicare Part D will allow any willing pharmacy to dispense specialty medications, and some states require that any pharmacy can dispense specialty medications. So depending upon your state, you may be able to dispense to everybody. Regardless of your state, you should be able to dispense to anybody with Medicare Part D. So they are definitely the lowest hanging fruit from a patient basis. Sometimes those payment arrangements or the payers, Medicaid managed care, for example, if you're in California, payers can limit who is eligible to dispense medications, specialty medications to their members. So if it's a Medicaid managed care program and you're in California, there's a good chance you won't be able to fill those medications or those specialty medications for patients. So really understanding where your opportunities lie come down to a few different things: your therapeutic categories, who your patients are, and who is willing to pay you for the service. Next is a marketing plan or the sales side of the specialty pharmacy business. To maximize volume that you're seeing through your pharmacy, you really need to understand how the prescriptions will be captured and sent to the specialty pharmacy and how to minimize leakage. In Covenant up in Detroit, what we're doing is we're just having every single prescription, whether it can be filled or not, go to the specialty pharmacy. And then it's up to the pharmacy team to decide or to see if they can fill that medication or not. If they can't, then they become responsible for sending it out to the payer or the specialty pharmacy that is under their payment plan. Michigan is a state that does not mandate open access. So the commercial payers, many of them have specialty pharmacy arrangements in place with other groups and mandate that patients pick up their medications there. So in that case, the majority of patients that they're going to see will be on the Medicare Part D side. There will be an occasional non-Medicare patient, but with the size of their specialists in their group and their ACO, it's well worth that effort. I would say that the most successful programs that I've seen all actively market this business to physician groups and their staff. They work closely with the nurses and the staff of the target specialties. They also talk about how they can really help those office staff with prior authorizations and now having the pharmacy take over these responsibilities. This is an enormous burden on the physician office, and they love handing this off. At larger hospitals, we'll often see the pharmacy embed pharmacists or techs within specialty clinics to identify potential opportunities and flag them to the staff, or market them directly, or market the services directly to the patient. There are also other hospital-owned business lines that regularly interact with patients on specialty medications that can provide additional marketing channels. It is important to sell your pharmacy services and why this is so good for the patient, why it's so good for the hospital, and why it's so good for the clinical staff to use your specialty pharmacy over other options that they might have. Moving on now to the staffing and organizational structure. Depending upon what kind of accreditation you want, you may or may not need to have 24-hour access to pharmacists. Most of our smaller hospitals just have a phone rollover to the on-call pharmacist if it's needed. I would say that maybe once a year a specialty question comes through after hours. You need to have adherence management, the ability to communicate and follow up with the physicians, financial assistance in-house, or, in the case of some hospitals, they use actually our organization to help them find financial assistance for their patients when they need them. Actually, just today, it's great. It's probably the favorite part of my business, just helping patients cover their out-of-pocket needs through different programs. Patient education and medication counseling is important. Being able to monitor patients and their results, lab results, any other blood pressure needs, those kinds of things that might need to be measured for the manufacturers to allow you to sell that medication, and proactive patient outreach for prescription refill. With all of this said, specialty pharmacy staff really need to have strong communication skills, and they need to be focused on both growing the business with new patients and new physicians, as well as retaining existing business. This kind of business is so attractive to so many pharmacies that they really actively try to go out and target your pharmacy or your patients to bring the specialty medications over. Walgreens is notorious for this, with pharmacists who are trained to try to identify patients that might be on specialty drugs and market this to them to bring it over to Walgreens from their existing pharmacy. Here's a little bit about us and what we do, both in specialty pharmacy as well as other areas. We've worked with over 400 hospitals, ranging from critical access hospitals all the way through to the country's largest health systems, helped sign millions of dollars and helped millions of patients on both the pharmacy and consumer healthcare front. I would say that our competitive difference is that we do not own a specialty pharmacy. We own a GPO. We're not a technology company. We'll not be pushing our own operations as one of your eventual solutions. We have the kinds of experts that will recommend the right path for you without any future conflict of interest. This could be a go-it-alone approach. It could be where we help quarterback a process and implementation if you need it. It might be a partnership with one of the specialty pharmacy operators that we like to work with or have worked in the past, or even a new one if you've come across them. We just want to help you with whatever suits your business best on the specialty pharmacy front for both financial reasons as well as patient care benefits. So regarding next steps and determining if this is the right time for your pharmacy to look at specialty pharmacy, it's important that you don't go down this path without having a plan. It can be expensive to launch a program like this and then try to unwind it if the wrong decision's made. Happy for anyone on the call today to set up a call with us, probably in 10 to 15 minutes of conversation, a little bit of learning about your hospital. We can help determine if it is something worth investigating on your end for your hospital system. We can look at the size of your hospital, what kind of specialists you have in your community, and talk you through some of the initial things that you might want to look at. We can also talk to you about how other hospitals are doing. Conversation won't last a long time. It won't cost you anything. But if you're just interested in knowing a little bit more, definitely happy to help. My details will be on the next slide. For those of you that want the slide deck, there is a 3-question survey at the end of the presentation. So if you would like a copy of the slides, please just answer yes to that question. Again, here's my contact details. If you want to reach out, please feel free to ask me any questions that you have. And I will be sending the slide deck out to those of you that need it. Have a great day, and thanks again for joining us.